Hi, my name is Charve, and today I'll be talking about operant behavior, which is chapter 4 in Skinner's About Behaviorism book. This is the book right here. So basically, I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of the topics he discussed and his thoughts on things, and then I will ask you 2 questions to open discussion. So Skinner begins with talking about the consequences of behaviors. He states that if a consequence of a behavior is reinforced, then it is more likely to happen again. He then gets into the different types of reinforcers, which are positive reinforcers and negative reinforcers. So a positive reinforcer, it strengthens any behavior that produces it. So he gives an example of using a glass of water when you are thirsty. So if you find yourself thirsty and you use a glass of water to quench your thirst, the water will become positively reinforcing. This means that the next time you are thirsty, you will be more inclined to go for that glass of water. So on the other hand, a negative reinforcer strengthens any behavior that reduces it or terminates it. For this, he gives the example of a pinching shoe. So if your shoe is pinching you, you will be more likely to take off your shoe to alleviate that pain. This eventually leads you to the behavior to become negatively reinforcing, and the next time your shoe is pinching, you will be more likely to take your shoe off. He also reminds us that reinforcement always increases behavior, whether it is positive or negative. The next section he talks about is feelings of reinforcers. So he discusses how operant conditioning is a product of natural selection. So he states that behaviors are reinforcing because of survival value and evolution. So if a behavior does not have that survival value, then it's not going to be reinforcing to a person. Like they have to have that survival value in order for, a behavior change to occur. And, the main point of his section right here is to show that feelings are not the reason that people do things. A lot of times people will say, I did this because I was sad or happy or, some type of feeling that's associated, with the behavior. But according to Skinner, behaviors have nothing to do with feelings, smells, tastes, looks, any of that. He says that they are simply collateral effects from whatever caused the behaviors and feelings in the first place. And, the feelings come after the behavior. But, people just oftentimes get confused because they think that's the reason when it's really not. So Skinner also talks about that people associate the feelings with being the reason for their behavior because the effects that cause the behavior are hard to see or hard to figure out. Skinner also talks about how saying that you like something can be seen as feelings, but in actuality, it is something that is reinforcing to your behavior. So we say, I like this type of music. Somebody might think that, that's a feeling. But according to Skinner, it's not. It's just something that's going to reinforce your behavior and it's going to increase your chances of listening to that type of music again. Next, he gets into needs, wants, desires, and wishes. So he says that needs are violent forces, restraints, or compulsions. So whereas wants describe shortages of some type. However, he does say that both terms can be used interchangeably and they're basically synonyms for each other. And these shortages come from deprivation. So the main thing with this section is that knowing the level of deprivation or aversive stimulation helps to more accurately predict how reinforcing something will be. So if you are very deprived of something, your behaviors will be highly reinforced when you finally get that item. Like, for example, say you really want, or you are highly deprived of a pineapple. When you finally get that pineapple, your behaviors are going to go through the roof and you're going to be super reinforced and, all your behaviors are going to increase when it comes to you wanting that pineapple, if that's a good example. All right. And throughout this whole chapter, he relates reinforcement back to survival value and deprivation or aversive stimuli. And, he's saying that those are the reasons that behaviors are reinforced. He also briefly talks about wishing and how wishing is an increased state of deprivation, and it occurs when the behavior is not possible. And he talks about how it's like missing someone. Like, someone is far away and, they're not near you and, you're really missing them. But he said it's not because you miss them, it's because you're deprived of them. The next section that he talks about is idea and will. So he talks about how the current setting may play a role in the probability of a response, but that's not the only thing that, plays a role. Things can also be influenced by deprivation. And, with ideas, Skinner says that there seems to be no necessary prior causal event, basically saying that the idea of something is the behavior in and of itself. So he gives the example of the rear door. So a person is locked out of something, the house, the car, anything, and they have an idea of going to try the rear door to see if it's unlocked. So, with his ideas or his thought on it is that the act of going to try the rear door is the behavior itself. And, that's how he explains ideas. So after he talks about ideas, he talks about will. So he says that will is more of a choice. And, with will, we're doing it because we choose to do something. So it's a choice. And then he also talks about how operant behavior is voluntary. And, he says that, things are not uncaused or behavior is not uncaused, but those causes are just harder to figure out for, some reason. Skinner also talks about how operant behavior is the field of purpose and intention. So basically a person participates in an activity knowing that something will come from that activity. He also says that purpose and motives are contingencies of reinforcement. So, yeah. Next, Skinner talks about schedules of reinforcements, which he kind of mentions briefly, not really a lot in detail. And, he basically says that frequent reinforcement builds faith, but when extinction exists, which is the lack of reinforcement or, no reinforcement at all, it leads people to feel uncertain, depressed, or disappointed. So after this, he talks a little bit about punishment. And so punishment removes behaviors from a repertoire. So, it's going to decrease behaviors while reinforcement increase behaviors. So Skinner says that, the type of punishment from previous events determines how a person feels in that situation. So, if something happened in the past and they received punishment for that behavior, then, that's going to determine how they're going to react or respond the next time. So the main idea with him is that we have to consider other mental factors when it comes to operant condition. We can't just look at one thing and, we can't talk about the feelings. It's not a feeling. It's, once again, that level of deprivation or aversive stimulus. And, overall, his idea is that things happen simply because people do them, not because of their mental state. So, yeah. So that was, just a summary of the chapter. That's what I took from it. You guys may interpret it differently, but I hope it helps to, help you guys understand the chapter more. So what I want to ask you guys to open the discussion first is how can you use operant conditioning to improve your work effectiveness? And second, I want to ask, what are some pros and cons of using reinforcement and or punishment while working with students or clients? So I know we all have different populations that we work with. So, you can relate this back to your work somehow or, just your past experiences. And, just, feel free to explain your thought on, reinforcement or punishment. And then also, how it can be used or how operant conditioning can be used to improve your work effectiveness. And I will also type these questions up and put them under my video so you guys can see exactly what the question is. So thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.